It's time for the 6th GRA Roundup, and the final ballistic, energy, and explosive roundup of all. But don't worry, there might be one about all the beat sticks the gun runners started walking into the Mojave. But for now, we have a heavy shipment of explosive weapons, which includes a lot of ammo, but has a very important weapon in the fight against enemies of the Mojave. But unlike the hand-thrown creations which highlight the insanity and ingenuity of the courier, these weapons are about making an explosive weapon as versatile as possible, but with the exception that it comes at a high cost to the courier. In fact, everything to be covered does have to be bought, and is best served by someone who is a friend of the boomer, as losing the munitions manager severely reduces the potential supply. As far as the fallout and gunrunner history of these weapons, we are seeing the more lack of a history with these types of weapons, the explosive launchers. Between the Rockwell Big Bazooka showing up in all the original 3 games and the grenade pistol, alongside the M79 grenade launcher in the Midwest, there were strangely few explosive weapons in those early entries. But it does make sense, as explosives was only a skill in Fallout New Vegas and 3, while the Big Bazooka is a big gun, and the M79 from Tactics was a small gun. Now, given that this section of the GRA focuses on ammo, it should be noted that while Fallout 3 had no alternate ammo, Fallout Tactics did expand the existing ammo variants, especially with 12 gauge and rocket ammos. But GRA gives the Mojave Wasteland the most interesting lineup of ammo, not just for ballistic ammo, but for these explosive 1-2. Something that hasn't been dethroned since. And while there are repeats between the sizes, there are ammo types that the Brotherhood in the Midwest would love to have. Now, as for the use cases in the Wasteland, it is still something that is very player-focused. In the original 3 Fallout games, the explosive weapons were limited to super mutants and heavily armed raider forces, with Tactics being the best example of the latter. But in Fallout 3, the missile launcher was simply a weapon carried by most groups that frequented the wastes, mostly as a method to deal with the random robots or super mutant patrols which they themselves could be armed with missile launchers. It was an arms race, but with how common it was, its damage was strangely weak, being half that of the Mojave version. But Fallout 3 also had the Fat Man, which was carried by the Brotherhood or other very organized groups for taking care of the biggest super mutants, but not really used against the player. But in New Vegas, only the boomers regularly use launchers and explosives as a quasi-religious thing. Meanwhile, a howitzer serves as one of the more important facets of the in-game quests. But otherwise, the actual use of these weapons by anyone else is incredibly minimal, as the main pest for the NCR is no longer the Master's remnants, but the Legion. Now, however, that doesn't mean the GRA won't be selling to their best customer, which is obviously the courier. Now, the first place to start is the weapons, since there are only a few of them. There's the GRA version of the Fat Man, which, unlike the other GRA versions of the base weapons, doesn't actually have any new mods, but is actually just able to utilize the new ammo types because it has a new animation attached to it. The original Fat Man didn't have an animation to unload it. Now, the next weapon is the Esther, which is the heaviest weapon in the game, and is a unique Fat Man that can also use all of these new ammo types. And then finally, there's the 25mm APW, which serves as another weapon that can use 25mm grenades, as its name implies, but is a much lighter and smaller package. So, the Fat Man GRA TM is the first on the docket, but is the most basic. It has a higher base cost of 2,000 caps more, for a total of 8,000 caps, just for the privilege to shoot these GRA mini-nukes. And just like the other GRA weapons, it can be bought from the Vendatron and Alexander of the Gunrunners. Additionally, it can be bought from the Boomer's munitions manager in Nellis, who can sell most, if not all, of the explosives from this roundup. Otherwise, it is like a normal Fat Man, and it can accept the non-GRA weapon mod for the Fat Man, the little boy kit for the same 2,500 caps, which reduces the weight by half. Again, it's a good buy for a weapon that can suddenly be used more than a handful of times. Now, the unique Fat Man, Esther, a name found in the 3rd section of the Hebrew Bible known as the Scroll, or the Book of Esther, which is also in the Christian Old Testament. As for the reason behind which, I do not know. I can only assume that it's because it defends the user from the atomic fires of the mini-nuke. Regardless, it is equipped with a blast shield and some nice, thick, clear parts. The Esther actually does defend the player by giving them plus 10 DT and plus 25 rad resistance, which works whenever the weapon is equipped, even when holstered. Which could be used for some pacifist activities, as the bonus to DT doesn't matter much when it comes to mini-nukes, but certainly helps when it comes to enemy bullets. Weighing 40 units and costing 18,000 caps, it is the 5th most expensive weapon in the Gunrunner's arsenal, and is the heaviest weapon in the whole game. As it is a unique weapon, it cannot benefit from the little boy kit, but heavyweight does drop the weight down to 20. Now the third and, in my opinion, the most interesting weapon is the 25mm APW, which is a semi-automatic grenade launcher using the obvious 25mm grenade. It is non-unique, and it is sold by the same people that sell the GRA version of the Fat Man, but also several people in the Wasteland as well. It is one of the most available GRA weapons, besides maybe the 5.56 pistol. Now its main use is adding a second weapon that can shoot those 25mm grenades. Because it uses those grenades, it does 50 explosive damage in the same 550 unit radius, which means that it can be used closer than Mercy or the grenade launcher, but it still maintains a fast fire rate of 2.5 shots per second. With a box magazines of 6, it can launch a solid barrage before it has to reload, which only takes 2.2 seconds, which is fairly fast, and it is fast enough that it can be used as a primary weapon. Additionally, it only costs 25 AP to use this weapon in VATS, where you will find that the shots do 2 impact damage, which is 2 more than the grenade machine gun. This is an efficiency of 2 in most cases, but technically a little more. Finally, it is more accurate at 0.7 spread, but it does lob projectiles instead of fire in a straight line, like all the grenades. The only thing really to consider whenever you want to choose whether you want to use it or not is the logistics, as it is an improvement overall. It is lighter at 8 units, but with heavyweight, the grenade machine gun is lighter by half a unit. The 25 APW can fire 745 grenades, but that is 250 less than the grenade machine gun, but it does cost around the same at 4,200 caps for the APW versus the 5,500 caps for the grenade machine gun. The best advantage that comes to it is that it only requires 75 explosives and 5 strength, which is far more accessible for a lot more playstyles. To add to this weapon, it does have weapon mods, which are a mixed bag, but they're reasonably good for a modest priced. The drum magazine is the first to talk about, which at one time was probably going to be a drum, but it is instead a longer box mag. It costs 1200 caps, but only adds 2 grenades to the magazine for a total of 8. It isn't crucial to the build, but it is a small amount for a minor boost to DPS and to general effectiveness against bigger creatures. Now the second mod is the long barrel, which acts like the grenade rifle mod of the same type. For 1300 caps, it doubles the velocity of the grenades, which also increases the range substantially. This mod alone is more or less essentially a boon for every playstyle. It limits self-damage and means the APW does outperform the grenade machine guns in terms of range, especially since the machine gun can be very lacking in uphill battles. The third and final mod is for 1900 caps, is improved internals, which, like most other mods like that, it increases the rate of fire by 25%, from 2.5 to 3.13, which surpasses the grenade machine gun until it itself is modded. This is a take it or leave it sort of mod. It is the most expensive and means you can get off more shots before the enemy rushes you in self-damage range. Now there is a point to talk to about perks. Now especially if you combine this weapon with the hit the deck perk, almost all the self-damage can be mitigated since it's using 25mm grenades, and it's half covered by hit the deck, meaning that a mid-tier armor set can potentially reduce the armor almost entirely. Now overall, the 25mm APW is my personal favorite weapon in the GRA, and made me use 25mm grenades a lot more. For the Mad Bomber, this is a sensible sell. It is the most reasonable gun and fills a niche that was missing from the main game. It might not be the perfect gun for you, but given that it might be able to pop up in a few merchants before the 1-8 trading post, the courier might get to use it to clear out a few places before they get access to the bigger grenade artillery. And finally, we are done with the weapons and can get onto the ammo. And there is some unique ones. First, we have the 25mm grenades, since we talked that weapon to death. There are 3 new ones introduced: Pulse, Plasma, and Timed. Now the Pulse explosive is self-explanatory, enough if you've seen the other Pulse video. It only does 8% damage, so 4, and a radius only 40% the size, so 220 units. When it hits a robot, it deals 75 damage directly to their health and 30 damage to anyone in power armor except for the NCR power armor. It's not as useful in the Mojave, but might prove useful in the Big Empty. It should be noted that any robots that are hardened actually have a bigger health pool and less DT, meaning that pulse ammo is actually less effective on them than normal ammo, as the wiring is hardened against EMPs. Now, that to be said, rapid firing a bunch of grenades at enemies tends to be useful and good anyway. To be honest, that does give it a very small use case, but at the very least it isn't more expensive at just the normal 8 caps, meaning as long as you buy them, you will find that they're nice to have. The next ammo is plasma, which is a cheaper alternative to the expensive high explosive ammo from the base game. At the same 8 caps, you get 30% more damage at 65, with an approximate 14% reduction in radius down to 475 units, which is still significant given that it is 12 caps cheaper than the high explosive grenades and limits the radius instead of making it almost too big. The perk splash damage can be used to overcome that reduction. Now the final one, costing the same as the other two, is the timed grenade. In theory, they can be used to shoot through holes in walls or doors if the hitbox allows it, or around corners if enemies actually stick to them, which is unlikely. They have a 5-second fuse, so with a lot of practice you could also use them to get a lot more distance out of the grenades than normal, but they tend to go wild unless the geometry of the floor is really flat. Now, the next grenade are the 40mm grenades with 2 variants, the pulse and plasma grenades, each costing the same as the standard ones, just like before. So only 12 caps, but this time they don't have the high explosive grenade to compete with, just the incendiary one, which sits at a weird place anyway. The pulse grenade is similar to the 25mm one, dealing 8% damage, which is 8, and doing damage in half the radius at 375 units. The EMP damage is doubled at 150 for robots and 60 for power armor. They are significantly more effective against robots than the base ammo, and like the 25mm ones, it can be used at point blank range as long as the player isn't wearing power armor. They suffer from the same specific use case as the 25mm ones, but the increased damage and radius means that they can kind of be used with reckless abandon in areas where they're needed. The plasma ammo also seems like a great way to fill Mercy, as it does 130 damage in a radius of 650 units, which can be used with almost the same muscle memory as one would use standard 250mm grenades, but with a lot more damage. Overall, if you can grab enough of these, they would make for great choices for your grenade rifle or launcher sidearm. Next is the missile, and there is only one, and it might be one of the weirdest ones yet. For 10 caps more than a normal missile, at 60 caps, the Hive missile launches 9 smaller missiles in a spread that's 20 times more than the launcher it uses. So Annabelle, or a modded missile launcher, has a much tighter spread of Hive missiles compared to a normal missile launcher. Now, using either two of the more accurate missile launchers means the spread of the missiles is actually comparable to the base missile launcher, especially Annabelle. Each missile has a blast radius of 500, which is 50% of the normal missile, and the explosion only does 35 damage, which means 6 have to hit to the same target to deal the damage of a single missile. But there is the possibility for more damage as they overlap. Overall, this ammo type lets you change your accurate missile launcher into a fairly scary shotgun that can rain death if you have a height advantage, as it's the easiest to hit a bunch of enemies with. Like a shotgun, the impact damages of 100 is split between the projectiles, meaning each one deals about 11 damage in impact, which means the Hive missile is sadly insufficient to deal with enemies with moderate to high DT, like the Deathclaws, but they can make a mess of any enemy that you can pierce. And then, everyone's been waiting for it, we have the mini nukes, which have the most variety and variety of prices. But the most important thing is they allow the courier to actually shoot enough times to break a fat man. They are the low yield, big kid, tiny tots, and timed mini nukes. For reference, a standard mini nuke does 600 explosion damage in a radius of 1,700 units, which is modified by each ammo type except the timed one. Now, low yield and big kid are opposite of each other. The low yield is cheaper at 125 caps. It is half the price of a standard one, but only does 400 explosion damage in a radius of 1,500 units, which is by far the most reasonable ammo for this weapon, since the nuke does 400 impact damage all by itself. and despite some people mentioning, I do not see any evidence that gravity has less of an effect on it, although it probably should. The big kit, on the other hand, is 500 caps, doing 800 explosion damage in a radius of 2,200 units, which is almost too big to use, and obviously too big to use with the splash damage perk. It is shot slower, with less force, and has more gravity than the standard round. It has a velocity of 1,800 instead of 2,500, and gravity pulls down with 25% more force. It is a dangerous round to use, both to you and yourself, and you need to have it in the air for more than a second to be safe from the explosion, at the very least. Now the timed one is perfect for killing coyotes for the GRA challenge, and for using it at close range. It is exactly like the normal mini nuke, even in price. The only difference is that it explodes in 5 seconds after being shot, which makes for some comedy when it explodes. You will soon realize that the impact is enough to kill almost anything anyway. Now finally, we have the Tiny Tots, which is the Merv from Fallout 3. It is the cheapest at only 100 caps, and is also likely to kill you as the spread of the Fat Man is not modifiable. 9 mini nukes shoot out of the weapon with 20 times the spread, and 1 or 2 of them will always be heading for the ground. Each does 125 damage in the radius of 500, which makes it easy to use if you've used the Hive missile, but you have to deal with the arc. Each projectile moves with a speed of 1,250 units and half the gravity affecting it. The 400 impact damage of the Fat Man, or 475 with the Esther, is split between projectiles, which is approximately 45 or 53 damage apiece. Hefty, but hard to take advantage of, given the spread. To wrap up this roundup, really is a hell of a thing. All these weapons are big ticket items requiring investment and are for people who have a lot of caps. Most of the things have a high chance to kill you, with everything having at least some chance to kill you. The benefit, of course, is that all of these weapons and ammo types don't need you to get another perk to use them, unlike Mad Bomber and the craftable explosives. They can be used seamlessly with an explosives playthrough and provide exceptional utility variety, and the Esther is a way to spend a lot of money. Most mods or even patches get rid of the GRA Fat Man, so you might not even notice the absence of that weapon with any Vanilla Plus experience. But overall, the APW is a great addition to the game and has several extra new ammo options. It is enough to make your signature weapon for a playthrough, and this is probably one of our best roundups yet. Previous roundups have had several weapons that don't particularly add a whole lot to the game or to the weapon. But with this one, there are several boons that you can get by just spending a lot of money.